Hey everyone! ChatGPTaylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. If you saw the title, then you know what this video is. Today's video will be my boot prediction for Season 4 of Disventure Camp. You might notice that a few of my predictions will be different from what I originally had in my cast analysis video, but I have my reasons for that, and I'll explain them. Before we officially start, I want to quickly state my prediction for what will happen in the next episode. Specifically with this sign. We know that Isabel and Jade's decisions will affect everyone. Now, I'm sure that there are many things that this twist could be. But I have a theory. Disventure Camp has taken many inspirations from Survivor, particularly from the challenges. So, for this first twist, I predict that we will see a twist that once appeared on Survivor. And I think I know the perfect one. In Season 30 of the American version of Survivor, 2 campers from each team got to choose between 2 choices. They could bring back a large bag of beans for their tribe, or they could bring back a smaller bag of beans and a clue to a hidden immunity idol. If this is the decision that Isabel and Jade have to make, I think they will both take the smaller bag and the clue to an immunity totem. One of my overarching predictions is that Isabel and Jade will play more of an antagonistic role in the season, and if this is the case, having immunity totems provides an easy way to have them advance further in the season, even if they are targeted. This eventually leads them to find the totems, and with that, let's begin with the first boot. The first boot of the season is someone that I didn't originally anticipate being eliminated early, but my gut is telling me to make this bold prediction. I'm predicting that Ted will be the first boot. I know I said in an earlier video that Ted could possibly be one of the main antagonists. But after watching the trailer and the first episode, I feel like Ted is being set up as the surprising first boot. Based on Logan, Alessio, and Richard looking back at him in fear, and Ted looking very proud of himself, I think Odd Nation Cartoons wants us to believe that he's pulling off a big move at the elimination ceremony. But in reality, since Odd Nation Cartoons likes to be unpredictable, as we know from the eliminations of Gabby and Gret from last season, I think Odd Nation Cartoons plans to have Ted be the star that burned too bright too quickly, and have him flame out. Especially after he claimed in episode 1 that everyone else is playing for second place, it would be hilarious if he was the first boot. I think he'll try and be a mastermind and manipulate people right from the start, which makes sense considering that his profession as a poker player requires him to manipulate people. However, since his description states that he's not good at managing relationships, I think he might not realize that his demeanor is turning people away from him, such as when Alessio scooted away from him during one of the challenges in the trailer. And based on him pulling Linda into a bush seemingly before an elimination ceremony, I think he'll divulge a big plan to her in hopes that she'll help him eliminate Richard. However, this moment will make Linda realize that Ted is a big threat, and she'll set a plan to convince the women to vote out Ted. And this makes sense since Linda proposed an all-female alliance to Natalia in episode 1. And since the women are sitting at the elimination ceremony in this order, I think Linda will whisper to Isabel to tell the other women to vote for Ted. Isabel will then tell Natalia, and then this will lead into the scene in the trailer where Natalia whispers to Anastasia, who then whispers to Marisa, creating a 5-3-1 vote that sends Ted out. All 5 women vote for Ted, Ted votes for one of the other men, and Logan, Alessio, and Richard vote for one of the women. It would be a shocker if this happens, but I think Odd Nation Cartoons has it in them to do this. My prediction for the second boot might be a bit controversial, but I'm going for it. My pick for the second boot is Amelie. First of all, I don't think Odd Nation Cartoons will make the blue team lose 2 challenges in a row, meaning that someone on the red team is in danger. And by process of elimination, I don't think Spencer or Diego will be gone yet since they seem to be hinted as the potential main couple of the season. I don't think Tristan, Ivy, or Zaid will go since I can imagine all 3 of them having good backstories to explore. And while I could see Hannah or Benji being eliminated first, my gut is telling me that the 2 of them could end up getting into a bit of a relationship while on the show, which might prolong their stay. This only leaves Amelie and Jade, and I feel like Jade has more potential for a good backstory, leaving Amelie as the best option for a second boot. But how do we justify this? Well, episode 1 showed that Amelie isn't willing to be a team player. There was a scene where Hannah is pushing Amelie and Ivy apart, with Amelie looking upset, so that could hint at some animosity between Hannah and Amelie. And if we look at the intro, Benji and Hannah start by having a good conversation, but Amelie breaks it up, making Hannah annoyed. And then in the season trailer, Hannah seems scared of Amelie, so I think Amelie's sharp and driven nature might make her come off too strong, turning people against her. And with Amelie admitting in the episode 1 trailer that she has high standards, I just think that all signs are pointing towards her being too overbearing for the team to deal with. So assuming that Amelie and Hannah target each other, then Benji probably votes with Hannah, since it's implied that there may be a relationship there. Meanwhile, I think Tristan, Ivy, and Zaid might just want to keep the team strong, so since the clown challenge is likely to appear earlier in the season due to its presence in the trailer, Benji might mess up the challenge for the team, so all 3 of Tristan, Ivy, and Zaid would vote for Benji. This leaves Jade, Spencer, and Diego as the swing votes. And while Spencer may want to vote for Hannah so he can stop Benji from being distracted by her, as we could assume from this scene, I think Spencer will acknowledge that he needs to earn Jade's loyalty after he brushed her off during the flag challenge, so I think he agrees to vote for Amelie with them. This results in a 5-3-1 vote that sends Amelie out. For the third boot, I have someone who I always thought would be an early boot, and it's Alessio. I could be very wrong, but I just don't see Alessio making it very far. I said in an earlier video that his laid-back nature could be his downfall, and I still think that's the case. When looking at episode 1, Alessio admitted that the early bonding doesn't concern him, which is pretty bad strategy if you ask me, since people will be less inclined to keep him around. And although the trailer seems to show him being decent in challenges, since this is a scripted show, I feel like the campers that last longer will have a good story arc attached to them, and I just don't think Alessio has that, so I have to boot him earlier than some of the others. And it's an easy move. All we need are for the women to stick together from the previous vote and eliminate Alessio by a vote of 5-3. It might seem boring, but I suppose that Odd Nation cartoons can build up suspense by acknowledging that the women have the majority and that their decision on who to eliminate is between Richard, who Linda hates, and Alessio, who annoys some of the others. Sorry, Alessio. Hopefully you find some inspiration for your paintings. As for the fourth boot, it's a little more difficult than I originally thought. Again, I could definitely see it being Benji or Hannah because they were on the chopping block last time. But right now, I'll go in a different direction and pick Zaid as the fourth boot. At this point, I feel like the trio of Tristan, Ivy, and Zaid have been given enough time to forge a strong bond, and that it's time for one of them to get voted out in order to kickstart the other two story arcs. And between these three, I feel like Zaid is the one that has the potential for the quickest story arc, meaning that he's able to be eliminated much earlier than the other two. And since Ivy's arc will probably have something to do with her struggling to socialize, losing one of her closest allies would probably help kickstart her story arc. But how does this happen? Well, I assume the trio of Tristan, Ivy, and Zaid stick together and vote for Benji, just like they did at the last ceremony. Meanwhile, since I think Jade will try and play an antagonistic role on her team, I think she could use the results of their last ceremony to get Benji to target Zaid, and she'll probably be able to get Spencer and Diego to vote along with them as well. And due to Hannah's potential relationship with Benji, I think she joins him in this vote, sending Zaid home by a 5-3 vote. Sorry, Zaid. Hopefully we like you while you're on the show. Now, I would normally move on to the fifth boot. But for this one, I'm doing something a little different, and I'll explain why later on. I'm going to do a double elimination, with each team voting out a camper. For the blue team, I think Anastasia will get voted out. Now you might be thinking, Taylor, didn't you predict that Anastasia will win the show? Yes, I did. And I'll get to that in a bit. But right now, I think Anastasia and Linda will get into a fight and start targeting each other. Going back to what I said during Alessio's elimination, since Linda is shown to really want Richard out, what if Anastasia is the one that campaigns for Alessio to get voted out? And since Anastasia succeeds in doing this, it upsets Linda because, as she claimed in the episode 1 trailer, she wants to be the one pulling the strings. This causes Linda to target Anastasia since she wants full control of the team. Linda would probably get Logan to vote for Anastasia, since Logan seemed to be scared of Anastasia in this scene in the trailer. And if Logan votes for Anastasia, then Richard probably joins him, since I think the two of them would be allies by this point. But Linda still needs a fourth vote to have a majority. I originally thought that the fourth vote would be Marisa, since the season trailer had a scene where Marisa and Linda shook hands. However, after the intro had this scene of Marisa helping Anastasia off the helicopter, I feel like the two of them might have a close bond, which would make Marisa not want to vote for Anastasia. So I'll just chalk up the handshake scene to Marisa agreeing to let Linda be the team leader, since Marisa admitted in the episode 1 trailer that she's not a natural leader. But who will the fourth vote be? Well, I think it will be Isabel. Isabel mentioned in her audition that people will flock to her as either their shepherd or to the slaughter. So having Linda go to Isabel for help might cause Isabel to believe that this is fate, as a quote-unquote lamb has flocked to her as her shepherd. And with there being a decent implication that Isabel isn't afraid to be devious in the game, I don't think Isabel will find it difficult to betray an alliance member at this point. Therefore, I think Isabel is the fourth vote that gives Linda the majority to take out Anastasia by a vote of 4-3, assuming that Natalia and Marisa still vote with Anastasia to take out Linda, due to Anastasia's desire to blindside Linda in return. Moving on to the red team, I think that now is the time for Hannah to get voted out. And I'll explain. If Benji and Hannah do have a small relationship by this point, but Benji is aligned with Spencer, then Spencer would see their relationship and get annoyed at how Benji is letting his feelings ruin his game, since Spencer is all about formulas and logic. This would make Spencer think that if Benji is going to be a good ally, then Hannah needs to go. This would prompt him to rally the votes to get Hannah out. Tristan and Ivy would agree since they may be desperate due to just losing one of their closest allies, and Jade would agree since it causes more chaos on the team for her to hide behind. So even if Diego stays loyal to Benji and Hannah by joining them to vote for someone like Tristan, that creates a 4-3 vote where Hannah still gets eliminated. Sorry Hannah. Just a casualty of a romantic subplot. However, this isn't the end for Anastasia or Hannah. Recall from one of my previous videos that I predicted there to be a team swap in this season. So with this in mind, I think there will be a twist that will save Anastasia and Hannah from being eliminated, and they will instead become the new team captains, and will pick their teammates for the rest of the pre-merge. This would also coincide with Spencer's audition tape where he said that there was no twist that could stop him from winning. That moment could be foreshadowing this twist as Spencer made a big move to blindside Hannah, and now that this twist kept Hannah in the game, it could very easily stop him from winning. And finally, I predict that the team swap would result in these teams. I think this is plausible since Anastasia and Hannah would want to stay away from people who aren't on her side, so Anastasia would want to send away Linda, Logan, and Richard, while Hannah would want to send away Jade, Spencer and Diego, even though Diego didn't vote for her in this timeline. They would also want to keep their closest allies with them, with Hannah staying with Benji, and Anastasia staying with Marisa, Natalia, and Isabel, since Anastasia isn't fully certain about which of those three voted against her. Moving on, let's talk about the actual fifth boot. In my mind, I'm picking Benji. Normally I wouldn't pick Benji, but I've seen so many people pitch Benji as an early boot that I just can't help but feel like he's an early boot too, even if he and Hannah do end up getting together. With the way I see this playing out, Hannah and Benji vote for Tristan since Tristan voted for both of them at previous ceremonies. Meanwhile, Tristan and Ivy vote for Hannah, since that's what they did at the previous ceremony. This leaves Linda, Richard, and Logan as the swing votes. I assume they vote together since that's what they did at the previous ceremony, and I think Linda pulls the other two into voting for Benji, possibly viewing him as an annoyance. Maybe Benji starts being more vocal about targeting Tristan and Ivy in an attempt to show Hannah that he cares about her, especially after the embarrassing moment he had in episode 1. But in the end, the final result is a 3-2 vote, with Benji being voted out. He leaves distraught and tells Hannah to do what she can to win. For the sixth boot, I'm putting Spencer in this spot. This might seem crazy because I've seen quite a few people say that Spencer will make it far, but I have my reasons. Now that Spencer, Diego, and Jade are in the minority against 4 campers from the other original team, they should be working to try and socialize with them in hopes of flipping one of them to their side. However, there's no guarantee that Spencer will be able to successfully socialize with them. Even though he said that he knows a variety of topics to talk about, considering how much priority he places on academia, I would bet that his idea of good topics isn't universal. And he also said that anything is simple if you break it down into a formula. However, not everything can be broken down into a formula, like social interaction. You actually need to factor emotions into a social interaction, which Spencer might struggle with. And if this happens, this could easily earn the ire of the 4 original blue team members on his team, putting a majority of the team against him. Now, you might be asking, wait, Isabel voted against Anastasia last time, so shouldn't she do that again? Here's my theory. Obviously, Isabel didn't plan for Anastasia to get back in the game. But now that she's back, Isabel has to try and do damage control. The way that she would do this is to go to Anastasia and apologize profusely for voting for her, and claim that Linda, Richard, and Logan tricked her into it. The reason why Isabel would think this would work is because in her audition tape, Isabel claimed that people would underestimate her. So, Isabel would think that if she appears remorseful for her decision and claims that she was being manipulated, Anastasia would just think that Isabel was just taken advantage of, because clearly someone as pure-hearted and loving as Isabel couldn't have done it out of malice, right? While Anastasia would rightfully be upset at this, I think she would at least accept it on the basis that at least Isabel admitted to it, and so she could have the numbers to whittle down the other team. So, assuming that Jade, Spencer, and Diego vote for Isabel to try and win favor for Anastasia, the original blue team members ultimately stick together and send Spencer home for his poor behavior relative to the others. He leaves upset, completely confused as to how his rationalizing didn't help him win. Up next, I think I'm pitching Tristan as the next boot. This one is tough because I have high hopes for Tristan, but I just don't think they will get much further than this. Here's the story. After Zayd's elimination, Ivy is distraught, having lost a close ally. And now that they're on a new team, Tristan explains to Ivy that they need to start socializing with the others in order to make new allies, which Ivy struggles with, since she's worried that she'll be perceived as fake due to her background as an actress and Ria's prior actions on the show as an actress. But in Tristan's elimination episode, they explain some sort of backstory about their life to Ivy. Something about how they were once scared of reaching out to others in fear of how they might think of them. And while not everyone has been friendly, they are glad that they reached out because the people who did remain friends with them are so kind towards them, such as Ivy. This allows Ivy to understand why she should persevere through her socializing struggles, while also telling the audience more about Tristan's backstory, setting the stage for their elimination. But how will Tristan get eliminated? Well, Tristan and Ivy vote for Hannah since that was what they did a few ceremonies ago. But for Linda, Logan and Richard, since they've found a way to work together, they work on getting Hannah to their side so they can have a majority. Linda does most of the legwork here. She tries treating Hannah as if she was her daughter, telling Hannah that she wants what's best for her, and that the two of them can run the game together as a duo, noting how Logan and Richard are a duo and that Ivy and Tristan are a duo. Hannah is ultimately swayed by this, and this new coalition puts their votes on Tristan, sending them home by a vote of 4-2. This greatly upsets Ivy, but Tristan encourages her, and they tell her that they'll be rooting for her to win. This elimination makes Ivy realize that she can't afford to be afraid anymore, and that she needs to make a change if she's going to survive any longer. Now for the 8th boot, I'm putting Richard in this spot. I don't feel completely right about this prediction, but I feel like Richard isn't going to make it far, and this is probably the best time for him to go. His story will likely have him get involved with Logan, due to their mutual love for sports. I predict that Richard may feel some sort of insecurity, feeling like he really needs to do well in order to make his daughter proud. Logan would probably play a big role in assuring Richard that being a hard worker is enough to make her proud. Maybe Logan makes an analogy to how his teammates don't always win competitions, but that he's proud of them anyways because he can tell that they're giving their all, and that if he was Richard's child, he'd be proud of how hard his dad was working to make a living. This would probably give Richard the closure he needs to set up his elimination. And his elimination is pretty reasonable. With Ivy having lost her last close ally, Linda steps in to try and pull her into an alliance with her and Hannah, so that they can have the majority to take out Richard, which is what Linda has wanted since the beginning of the game. While Ivy agrees to it due to being out of allies, Hannah is left a bit uneasy, and the suspense of the elimination can be built around Hannah's insecurity about being abandoned due to Linda's attempts to gain Ivy as an ally. This insecurity stems from the earlier episodes where campers tried targeting her, and the fact that she already lost her closest ally, so she's scared of losing another one. This could make her wonder if she should work with Logan and Richard to vote out Ivy so that Linda will be forced to be loyal to her. Ultimately, Hannah sticks with Linda and Ivy to vote out Richard by a vote of 3-2. Richard is upset, but ultimately encourages Logan to win, thanking him for his words of wisdom. Now we're on to the 9th boot. With the new red team down 6 members to 4, I think it's only fair to go back to the new blue team. And out of these 6, based on what I've predicted so far, I think I have to go with Natalia on this one. But to set the context for this elimination, I predict that the first half of the season will see Natalia and Isabel forge a strong friendship, which is made even stronger when they vote together for the first couple of elimination ceremonies. However, after Isabel flips and votes out Anastasia, Natalia gets worried over Isabel's true intentions and whether or not Isabel likes her as a person. Since we know that Natalia is very social and is willing to ask big questions, I see her potentially asking Isabel a lot of questions to try and assure her loyalty. This may annoy Isabel, who could start viewing her as being intrusive. And considering Natalia's sample line, even though it's not canon, we can't definitively rule out that something like this won't happen. It's still possible for Natalia's teammates to view her as being too much. But how does this result in Natalia getting votes? Well, from what I've seen so far, I get the sense that Natalia really just wants to be liked by the people around her. So with this in mind, and with Natalia's tendency to talk a lot, it's likely that once this conflict between Isabel and Natalia starts, Natalia will probably talk to at least one of her other teammates to get some validation for her concerns. I assume that she'll tell Anastasia or Marisa first, and once Anastasia hears about this, I think she'll realize that this is the time to get revenge on Isabel for flipping on her earlier this season. Anastasia originally brings it up to Natalia, but she refuses, not wanting to ruin her image any further. So instead, Anastasia goes to Jade and Diego and tells them about the conflict between Natalia and Isabel, confident that they will join her in targeting Isabel since the two of them are on the bottom of the team. Both Jade and Diego agree, but Jade sees this as an opportunity to regain control of the game. With Diego voting alongside her, Jade goes to Isabel and pitches to vote for Natalia, telling her that Anastasia and Marisa want her out, and that this is her only chance to stay. The suspense for the ceremony focuses on Isabel wondering if this is the right move for her. And when the ceremony comes, Anastasia and Marisa vote for Isabel, hoping that eliminating her will allow them to pull in Natalia with them, while Natalia votes for Jade, not wanting to betray any of her allies. However, Isabel makes a big move and joins Jade and Diego in voting for Natalia, sending her home by a vote of 3-2-1. Natalia is saddened, leaving with the realization that there is such a thing as being too social and too talkative. Isabel feels a bit of guilt for voting out her best friend, but admits that it was either her or Natalia getting voted out, and that she needed to stay. And finally, she draws on her audition tape, claiming that Natalia was a goat that was led to her as part of a slaughter, and that there was nothing she could do to save her. Now, in my original predictions video for this season, I predicted that we would see 2 campers return to the game after being eliminated. So for this prediction, I will stick with that idea and bring 2 campers back into the game. If there is a team swap, I think 1 camper from the pre-swap phase will return along with 1 camper from the post-swap phase. From the pre-swap phase, I think I would bring Amelie back. I never wanted to eliminate her that early, so I think we could bring her back and give her some good closure. As for the post-swap campers, it's a tougher decision, but I'm going to bring Spencer back, because I think there's a plotline that can come from him being already eliminated as well as a plot involving him and Diego, which I'm sure we all know about by now. To kick off the merge, we have our 11th place finisher. Who will it be? Well, with the scenario that I've laid out, there are several factions. With Spencer's return, there's an alliance of Spencer, Diego, Jade, and presumably Isabel too, considering that Anastasia and Marisa tried to vote her out. There's also a duo of Anastasia and Marisa, who are now scrambling for support after failing to blindside Isabel. Then there's a sort of disjointed trio of Linda, Ivy, and Hannah, who recently banded together to vote out Richard. Meanwhile, Amelie and Logan are sort of on the outs with no remaining allies. Based on these divisions, I think that even though Anastasia previously had disagreements with Linda, I think Marisa would convince Anastasia to swallow her pride and align with Linda's group, since I doubt they would be able to align with Isabel's group due to their failed attempt against Isabel. At the same time, I think Logan would join Jade's group since Linda just orchestrated the elimination of his closest ally. This leaves Amelie as the swing vote, and I think the suspense for the elimination can be centered around who Amelie would vote for. However, keep in mind that in this timeline, Isabel and Jade have immunity totems from their decision earlier in the game. So we could end up in a scenario where one of these totems gets played to nullify a bunch of the votes. And based on how it seems like more people might be against Isabel than Jade, I can imagine a scenario where Anastasia gets her alliance to target Isabel for being a wolf in sheep's clothing, and once Isabel plays her totem, those votes get nullified, meaning that Isabel's group has full control of who gets voted out. But who is it? Well, after a bit of thinking, I decided that this could be another example of the Ashley elimination of Season 3, where Marisa is taken out for being seen as a calm leader holding together the opposing alliance. But how does this make sense narratively? Well, let's establish that Anastasia and Marisa had a tight bond from the beginning of the game, which I assumed from this image in the intro of the season. Anastasia appreciates Marisa's headstrong personality while Marisa appreciates Anastasia's desire to prove herself. It's pretty easy going for them up until Anastasia's elimination, and once Anastasia gets back, she is clearly more on edge and paranoid, which Marisa tries to mitigate for the rest of the pre-merge. Perhaps Marisa recognizes that just like on the battlefield, it's important to keep a cool head or else you could endanger the rest of your team. This mindset is even further emphasized when Anastasia's attempt to blindside Isabel fails and instead results in the loss of one of their allies. And when the merge arrives, Anastasia persists in her aggression to get revenge against Isabel for screwing her over twice, even if Marisa and Linda try to get her to target someone else to avoid a totem being played. So in the end, Anastasia's tunnel vision forces her coalition to vote for Isabel, and let's just say that Amelie votes for Isabel too for completion's sake, but Isabel plays her immunity totem for herself, nullifying these 6 votes and allowing her alliance's 5 votes to send Marisa home. This causes Anastasia to become emotional, knowing that her stubbornness caused the elimination of someone she cares about. Meanwhile, Marisa encourages Anastasia to go on and win, and Marisa can at least leave knowing that her mindset of remaining calm and collected while under pressure was correct, and that she should definitely be prepared to enlist in the military. Unfortunately, this is where I'll have to cut it for today. I wish I didn't have to cut this video into 2 parts, but I'll try my best to get the second part of the video out tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching part 1 of this video. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and I'll see you all tomorrow. But until then, farewell.